So, how did this information come to you? Obviously, you're not going to give us your sources,
Sure.
David Schuster, but were you seeking it out, or did somebody come to you?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I've been covering, white-collar criminal investigations at the federal level for a long time, starting with Marion Barry in the early 90s, Jim Guy Tucker in the Whitewater investigation in the mid-90s, the Monica Lewinsky scandal, the Jack Abramoff case, Ted Stevens, and then, most recently the CIA leak case with Vice President Cheney and Scooter Libby. So, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of prosecutors and attorneys and defense attorneys that have covered over the last 20 years. And it just so happened that over the last couple of weeks, as I started sort of digging into sort of Wisconsin and tracking some of what had already been reported, that I found out about a week ago that a couple of these contacts that I've known for a very, very long time, fortuitously for me, had a connection and were keeping track of what was going on in Wisconsin. So what I did is I took a lot of the information that had already been reported in Wisconsin, most notably by Daniel Bice at the Milwaukee Sentinel-Journal, and I started running it by these folks and say, look, here's what's going on. What does this, mean to you, to me? I said when Governor Walker has confirmed that he's taken out $160,000 from his campaign fund and put it into a personal legal defense fund, when under Wisconsin law there are certain requirements. He's got to meet a certain threshold if he's going to do that. And was able to get the confirmation from these folks that yes, he is a target of the federal investigation.
Now, can you say whether your sources are attorneys who deal with the Public Integrity Unit of the Justice Department, or somebody at the Justice Department in the Public Integrity Unit?
I'm not going to get too specific because I don't want to land them or myself.
You can't blame me for trying.
No, I appreciate you trying, and I would do the same thing. I think the important thing to remember, though, in all of this, as I try to state, is that these are people who do not have a horse in this race. These are not people who were involved in the recall. They don't care whether Scott Walker gets recalled or not. They just don't care. These are, gumshoe, long-time, government attorneys. And the other part about this is a lot of folks are saying, well, why did this come out, 3 days before the election? Why were you reporting this on a Friday night? Well, the fact of the matter is I would have had it, a week before if I'd started on it, because according to, these very reliable sources, this is something that happened well over a week ago, that for the past 5 or 6 weeks, Scott Walker and his attorneys had been pressing for what's known as an exoneration letter. In other words, federal prosecutors are duty-bound that if a public figure is approaching, say, an election, and they are not the target of an investigation, federal prosecutors under Justice Department guidelines are duty-bound to provide them with a letter saying you are not a target, so that they can sort of go about their business with an election and not have this cloud hanging over them. And Scott Walker's lawyers repeatedly asked for this, and finally were told by the prosecutors, no, we're not going to do that because Scott Walker is a target of this investigation, and he may face charges. So, look, I fully would have expected Scott Walker to deny the report. The fact of the matter is, if he had a way to deny the report and prove it, in other words, if he had been given a letter by prosecutors, as they are duty-bound to provide to Scott Walker if he's not a target, I guarantee that Scott Walker or his lawyers would have released that letter and said, this story is false. Here's a letter that we've gotten from government attorneys, from prosecutors, saying that we are not a target of the investigation. The fact of the matter is he cannot do that because he is a target. He has requested a letter. He has not received it. The prosecutors have made him a target. And so, look, he can say whatever he wants. I stand by my reporting 100%.
Stand by. Can you stand by for a moment?
Sure.
All right, 7:15, David Schuster with us. This is remarkable. 718, 106.7 FM, 1670 AM, WTDY. Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett joins us at 7:35 this morning.
June the 5th,
on the live line with us from Take Action News and also from Current TV, David Schuster, whose career we followed for a long time. David, I've always enjoyed your work on network television over the years.
Thank you, Sly. I appreciate it.
You've always had the distinction of being very direct. So I have to ask you, is the situation Scott Walker in garden variety? In other words, do these things happen all the time, or does a federal investigation have to be pretty far along before when the Justice Department is taking this sort of action?
Well, I'd say it's got to be far along, and keep in mind that the FBI, federal investigators, the FBI have been part of this for some time, so that sort of ties in the federal angle, and that you also have the attorney who's running the John Doe investigation who doubles as the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Wisconsin. So the fact of the matter is that in any sort of public corruption case that involves either sitting governor, and look, it was the same case when I covered Governor Jim Guy Tucker in the 90s. It was the same case when the Whitewater scandal, the Monica Lewinsky scandal, and that is when prosecutors are covering a public figure, there is an obligation to keep the Justice Department, the main Justice Department in Washington, specifically the Public Integrity Section, in the loop. And it's often the case that at some point in the investigation before indictment that there will be a lengthy memo that will be put together by the local U.S. Attorney or the independent counsel, whatever the case may be, in which they will send it to main justice and say, here's the evidence we have, here's the strengths and weaknesses, here's the law, here are the strengths and the weaknesses of the code that we're thinking of charging about, and it gets run up the flagpole at public integrity and sometimes even higher in the Justice Department. So there's nothing unusual, I'd say, about this, except for the fact that, yes, I mean, there have been governors and public officials who have faced this road before, and this is following the exact same track.
So it's my understanding there's a difference between a John Doe investigation on the state level and the federal level, and that the difference is that at the state level, witnesses are sworn to secrecy. At the federal level, the prosecutors are sworn to secrecy, but that witnesses can speak.
That's exactly right. I mean, in grand jury rules, anybody who appears in front of a grand jury or provides information to a federal investigation, federal prosecutor, they can say whatever they want. They can talk as much as they want. They can say as much as they want. I mean, I remember cases in the Monica Lewinsky grand jury where aides to Bill Clinton came out and spoke on the courthouse steps about what they had said in front of the grand jury, and on one occasion they lied about what they said because they were trying to help the Clinton defense. But they're free to say whatever they want. Now, what tends to happen is that somebody who's the target of an investigation, they may not get called in front of the grand jury or invited, because once it's clear that they may be subject of prosecution, then prosecutors have to build a case around them.
David Schuster with us on WTDY this morning. Of course, he broke the news that in fact Scott Walker is being investigated by the federal government, and in fact is not gotten a letter of exoneration. Would it be fair to say in this situation that the fact that somebody told you something, that maybe the federal arm of this John Doe investigation is getting a little impatient with the state, the pace of what's going on in John Chisholm's office in Milwaukee?
Well, look, I mean, it's no secret that a lot of investigations tend to sort of conclude or move a little bit faster than the John Doe investigation has. I mean, 13 government witnesses now. This has been going on for 2 years. The pace, I would say, is very earnest, which I think as a Midwesterner and all of us can sort of appreciate. There's a certain sort of approach that those of us in the Midwest tend to take, exceedingly polite and sometimes very cautious. But the fact of the matter is, at a certain point, when you're talking about both a federal investigation and a state investigation, and U.S. attorneys and local prosecutors tend to work together, there will be a point at which, assuming federal investigation continues, and again, once somebody is a target of an investigation, that means prosecutors are usually a 50% or better chance of actually indicting, that there will come a point at which the local prosecutors will defer to a federal investigation. In other words, they'll all continue to work together, but at a certain point when a federal prosecutor has charges or indictment ready to go, that tends to supersede, that tends to sort of jump the line in terms of the investigation, in terms of what may happen in court.
David Schuster with us on WTDY this morning. I remember the day that Cynthia Archer, who was one of Walker's top staffers for Milwaukee County, who happened to have a house here in Madison, and that house was raided, and the FBI assisted the Dane County Sheriff's Department. And I remember at the time there was all this speculation. Well, they were just helping because the state Justice Department didn't want to get involved. Does the FBI normally make a habit of knocking down doors if they're not investigating federal crimes?
No, I mean, it just doesn't happen that way. Look, there are some circumstances where you're talking about a very, say, rural area where a horrific crime may have been committed, and you've got, federal resources that can help a local investigation. In this particular case, though, you're not talking about some podunk town in Southwest Texas. I mean, Madison is a pretty progressive, sophisticated, large, area, and the law enforcement resources there are sufficient to do the sort of investigation that anybody would want to do. When the FBI is involved, again, it's sort of another very clear signal that there's a federal component to this, and that a federal prosecutor has determined, okay, there are issues related to...
What does it mean to be a target? I don't think that's something they stamp on people's forehead, but if Scott Walker, in fact, is the target, is there a threshold there? Or suddenly you cross the target Rubicon?
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind that anybody who's sort of on the orbit of federal prosecutors falls into three categories. There's somebody, you are a witness, you are a subject, or you are a target. You are a target when federal prosecutors, in the collection of evidence from an investigation, have determined in their minds that a crime was probably or likely committed, and what they are doing now is then they are moving the investigation away from a decision about whether a crime was committed to collecting the evidence that they believe can prove it.